Welcome back to Path to Glory, the Warhammer Underworlds podcast that focuses on competitive gaming, player development, and community growth. This episode was made possible by our patrons, so thanks to everyone who supports us. If you are interested in supporting the podcast monetarily, please check us out at patreon.com/Path to Glory. If that's not possible, we still appreciate the listens and the ratings. As always, this is Aman Kustro, and I'm joined by my balanced co-host, Jonathan Davis.
Hello. I am
How's it
very
going?
balanced, aren't I?
Yes, your yin and yang is on point right now.
Yeah. Very excited for today's episode.
Yeah, me too. I'm actually just kind of happy I can breathe normally. I had like a slight minor like surgery because I've been getting a lot of sinus infections last couple of years.
Oh, wow.
So they did like a scan of my face, and 'cause sometimes insurance is like, "Yo, you don't need it. You're so young." For all the non-Americans out there, yes, your insurance will tell you you don't need a surgery sometimes. And so they did the scan, and they were like, "Oh wow, you have a lot of like excess tissue in your nose." They're called turbinates. So got that reduced. They like just take like a shocking thing and just shock them off.
Oh,
But
wow.
just been draining blood for like 3 days, and so today's like the first day I woke up where I can like breathe through my nose. That was a temporary mouth breather, and it was the worst.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
tense.
So yeah, it was all right. It wasn't too bad. So I think my girlfriend's really happy because now I won't snore apparently. So
Yeah. Yeah, I had another friend that had something similar, I think. So cool.
yeah. Well, I guess for you, surgery free. Anything else going on? I know you've been saying that you've been working on your new gig. You've been enjoying that?
Yeah, just a lot of work. I've actually never had a surgery. I think I was only ever in a hospital once for I had a splinter that we could not get out when I was little.
Oh wow.
So yeah, just
Oh
been
yeah, I've
been
broken
lucky.
bones. I've required stitches. I have had a surgery. So yeah, I'm either someone who needs a lot of help or just the average person, and you seem to be a superhuman here.
Actually, I think I went one time when I was really little because I like fell and cut myself. I think I have a little scar on my
Yeah.
chin too.
I've got like a massive, like, it's not a massive bald spot, but it's like a slight bald spot back of my head because like when I was a kid, I was like jumping on a couch and I slipped, and
Oh,
like the windowsills were marble, and I just went plow.
yeah.
And so like I thought I was like thinning, because like male pattern baldness, and my mom was like, "No, it's just because you split your skull open when you were a child," and I was like, "Oh, great,
Wow.
thanks."
That's funny.
So mixed emotions overall, but enough of the banter. In today's episode, we will be covering the new, updated, Forsaken and Restricted list, as well as a warband specific errata that's been dropped by Games Workshop. It is the
Yeah.
first update since the release of Dire Chasm, which was in December of 2020. So, like 6 months, 6.5 months now. So,
Yeah. It's been a
well
while.
overdue. Yeah, been a while. Very excited to go over that. And for our patron listeners, stick around for the end phase, where we will talk about the warbands we're the most excited to play in the post-FaR meta and why. It's a whole new world out there. We're excited to mess around with some stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
In the meantime, how about you start us off with our first segment, Underworlds News?
Yeah, we have a couple things here. The first one is I want to thank our newest patrons, Glory Seekers Jared B. and Bean Suppa. We appreciate the support. I also wanted to mention that for patrons, if you want to use the patron RSS feed to listen to the end phase segments, you can do that. You can find your RSS feed in the My Membership section of Patreon. I don't know how many people you prefer that over some of the other ways to listen, but if you do, then you certainly can. I think we may also start putting the normal episodes in there as well, so that the patrons can just listen to one. They can listen to everything on one feed. So just be aware of that,
Yeah.
and keep an eye out for it. So
Super cool. Yeah, I did not know that was a thing, but that's very exciting.
Yeah, I just think I had activated the feed a while ago, so I don't know if anyone's been using it, but
Yeah,
they certainly can. So
cool. Yeah, shout out to Bean Suppa and Jared B.
yeah,
I've already been engaged with them in the Discords and stuff and having great conversations. So thanks for joining and supporting us. Really appreciate it.
absolutely.
Another thing I want to mention is that there is a Texas event. There'll be a Grand Clash in July, I think. Can you
Hmm.
confirm the dates?
Yeah, it's July 24th and 25th. Are the
Boom.
dates for the Lone Star Open.
Okay, awesome. And so it's going to be held in Dallas, Texas. Um, and it's going to be our first, I guess, post-COVID or semi-post-COVID event
Hmm.
after or in America, really. So should be a fun one. A whole bunch of other games there, including 40K, Age of Sigmar, Marvel Crisis Protocol, and so please sign up. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be doing prize support. Jonathan is the TO, and there will be a trophy as well that you can take. Right now, I think we've got about 10 people signed up for my latest conversations with the organization crew. So let's try to get to 20. We've got a lot of players in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and Austin, as well as a bunch of players that are a quick flight or even a quick drive away. So come on down and support us, help us out. I do think this is a pretty big deal, and this will impact the availability of Warhammer Underworlds and other events right now. Currently, so this event is part of the Frontline Gaming Open series, where they have Las Vegas Open, Lone Star Open, Atlantic City Open. And so if we want to get Warhammer Underworlds at Atlantic City and consistently keep it at Las Vegas and at Lone Star as well, we need to have a pretty decent turnout here. So the goal is 20, but if we can exceed that, that's awesome. And right now we're about halfway there with a month to go. So please sign up.
Yep. Yep. If you think you can go, purchasing the ticket would help a lot. So
Yeah.
thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Tony
all we have.
Tony
Oh,
yeah, Tony Field said he's coming. So
oh great.
we got a dude from LA. If he can make it, others can as well.
Yeah. Yeah, great.
So okay, well, let's jump into the meat and potatoes of the episode today. So there's been a couple updates, and it was very sneaky the way Games Workshop did it. So they released an article on Warhammer Community, specifically about the Spinefish from Elathane's Soul Raid,
Yeah.
and it's called 10 cards to help you fish for glory with Elathane's Soul Raids. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So as you read through the article, Dave Sanders talks about what cards may be great with him. I think it's like 10 cards. And then all of a sudden at the bottom, there's a very, very like slightly, it
Oh,
just
by
says
the
like new
way.
errata. Yeah. New errata, new championship rules, and new restricted list. So, uh, we're going to go ahead and I guess cover that. So I guess we'll start with the championship format rules update, which I don't think there are any in the document.
There's not much. Basically, they've just clarified that, um, all the new stuff is added with the essentials pack, and um, that's about it. But they did update that
Yeah.
document. So
Oh yeah, with like the boards and the
yeah, the
stuff
new
like that.
board. So
Yeah.
it looks like all of the boards that came with the starter set, and then the essentials pack are legal. I think we knew that, but they just had to update it. So
Right on.
yeah, we knew that. And then we have the other two documents.
Okay. Well, let's jump into the official errata and beta rule document, which is
Yeah.
it's stated as May 2021. So looks like even Games Workshop delayed this one, which is why they snuck it in at the end of a inconspicuous article. But there's two
Yeah.
major changes here, and these changes are highlighted in magenta to differentiate them from the previous update. So the first update is to Molog's Mob. Jonathan, if you've got it pulled up, would you like to read the errata to Molog?
Sure. So it says Molog inspired. Change Molog's ability on the inspired side to read. This fighter can make a move or charge action even if it has one move token. In addition, when this fighter has one charge token, it can still be activated, but cannot make super actions. What do you think?
Oh man, I've been dreaming about this day
I know.
for a very, very long time. I think it's a very, very strong change, and one that
Yeah.
fundamentally changes the way Mollog is meant or is played now, which I think is a good thing, given the fact that he's been pretty divisive in the current, actually since the history of his inclusion in the game. Um,
Well,
we are not
and
fans of Mollog.
and the last time they errated his uh, fighter card.
Well, so the last time they were his fighter card, it like you read it as this, right?
Yeah.
Kind of. And then they errata it to where like, no, he can double charge and he can keep swinging if he's has a charge token. And it's
Yeah.
really funny. 2 years later, they decide to switch it back, right? So
Yeah. So I think that there are two things that I like about this change. The first is that I think that it will help Mollog in the future not cause problems for the game. I feel like in the past, depending on what the universal pool is, his stat line is so skewed that certain builds just become like really, really, really good. Like tomes have been kind of crazy with him. Um, like and sort of like any sort of defensive control build, if you're able to play him that way, because he has so many wounds and like you know, in the previous meta with all the healing. To me, it just wasn't that fun, and cause some balance issues. So I'm hoping that this change will um, basically make it so that doesn't happen. And
yeah,
then not even like Malaga aside, I guess. I think it's cool that they're willing to do this sort of errata to warbands, um, because it just seems like it's good for the health of the game. If there's a warband that's potentially problematic, they can change it so that it's not. Um, I'm actually a little bit interested in trying out Mollog in this um, situation because I don't really have anything against the warband. I just don't find him enjoyable to play against or really with in the previous iterations. So maybe that'll change because great models and a cool concept. So
yeah. So I would like to echo your sentiments on the fact that it's awesome that Games Workshop is willing to make changes retroactively to warbands, especially ones that can potentially be problematic. I think the biggest issue that I see this solving is that he's no longer like an easy button to play. I think it's
hmm.
very easy to just put a deck together um, and smack away and roll really well. There are players out there who have tried to eliminate that dice variance a lot and built some really great tight decks. This comment isn't necessarily aimed towards them. It's more about like anyone can really pick up Mollog and do really well with him because of his propensity and the way he's designed is to break the core mechanics of this game, which is
Hmm.
by ignoring charge tokens and ignoring move tokens. Um, and then also, as you mentioned, depending on the universal pool, I feel like Dire Chasm was almost a perfect storm for him because it's like a Voltron meta, and we're going back to that whole vibe where it's like fight more and hold stuff, but not necessarily, um, you know, things aren't necessarily invincible, but they can get there, right? And fighters with great activation economy, which is Malog, and then also a high wound count, are able to take the use of upgrades and healing cards, for example, and turn them up to another level because again, they they're getting more mileage out of it. So like a strength of terror, maybe you only get one or two swings with like on an inspired Rippa, which is still really good. But then with Malog, you have the potential to get it, four activations,
Hmm.
including two charges around, which is a little bit more mileage. And because he hits harder, um, so sometimes the built-in balance of a warband can be offset by the universal card pool, and Malog can overcome that hump, if you will, easier than others. So I also think he's a great way to get someone to not play this game, especially if they're new, right? We've talked about Moloch being a noob stomper in the past,
Yeah.
and I've literally seen people quit this game because of what Malang has done, literally in front of me. Like packed up their stuff. A couple days later, it was all on Facebook to sell. And so I'm kind of glad we'll see him less. And for those of you like yourself who might be interested in trying him now, I think while he still has a propensity to do some really silly things, um, it may not be as consistently, or it could be like the skill required to play him is higher, which means you can make more mistakes, which might cost the Mollog player the game. So I think
Yeah.
it's really important.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think I do have I don't know if it's I don't know if it's pushback on. I don't know that I think he's easy to play, but I don't think he's easy to play against. So I feel like at a high level, I think that he does take a lot of skill to do well with. I mean, I think notably like he hasn't won a lot of events. Um,
Yeah,
but I think just being what he is, it takes a high level of skill to know how to handle that because it's so different than the rest of sort of the way the entire rest of the game works. He is almost his own thing. Um,
yeah,
and that to me is sort of the problem. I think he's a definite noob stomper. I think the I don't know the pros, so to speak, know how to handle him, but it's almost like up until you get to that point, it's just really frustrating for most people. So,
yeah.
but hopefully less so in the future.
Right, right. And I do want to clarify on the comment about being easy to play. I think at a high level he is very difficult to play. And I
Yeah,
think, players like Michael Carlin have demonstrated that, it takes a lot of skill and finesse to play this warband the way that they have in the past.
yeah,
Um, I also think it's really easy for like someone to take them to a local event and roll really well and win, right?
yeah.
I think that's
Especially
that's
for
the
people
point.
that are newer to the game and may have not
Exactly.
experienced him. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So that's
absolutely.
what I was referring to more rather than the high end technical
Right.
finesse style play that it's associated with him up until recently. Um,
Yeah, because
but
I think it's always worth remembering that like most people that play this game probably don't play it at the what we would consider the highest level. So,
correct. Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. Hopefully
So,
he's easier to manage going forward.
yeah. Yeah, and I hope that one day, Games Workshop can revisit Mollog and maybe redesign him from the ground up.
Yeah.
Um, because I do think he could be a quite interesting warband. But I think the fact that he was gatekeeping aggro in Dire Chasm, which is essentially an aggro meta, if you will, or was until this new FaR list,
Yeah.
um, was an issue, I think.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
you could so enough on Mollog. I think we're happy that this change was made, and for those of you who are Mollog fans, it sucks. I can definitely empathize, but kind of glad we're moving away from him and onto some cooler and newer things.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see. I don't think he's like completely gone. So I think we'll see. But yeah, I guess
Yeah.
the other thing we have in the errata is the new beta rule. You want to talk about that?
Yes. So I'll go ahead and explain what a beta rule is, and I'll go ahead and read it. And I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think about um, the change.
Yeah.
So a beta rule is essentially a rule that Games Workshop proposes that they're essentially saying this is what we're planning to change with this warband. Go ahead and test it. If the feedback is negative, we'll go ahead and make a change. Otherwise, if it looks good, then we're going to go ahead and make this an official rule. So it's a way
Yeah.
that the whole community can kind of play test something before it actually happens, right? The last
Yeah.
time this happened was with Cataphrine relics from season
Mm.
1 of Shadespire. So they were worth 2 glory instead of 1, which kind of killed that old broken deck archetype. So beta
Yeah.
rules are helpful. So we see a beta rule here for Kragra's Ravagers, which is a warband that I think generated a lot of hype when they first came out and then started to kind of get overlooked very quickly, despite the fact that they had these really cool mechanics. A lot of people just said they didn't land in the right spot. And so what this is doing now, it changes the inspire condition on each fighter to read. After an activation, there are 2 or more desecration tokens on the battlefield. Keep in mind that the current inspiration is 3 or more desecration tokens. What do you think?
Right. Yeah. Um, so I think this is an interesting change. I would say that it's certainly a buff. It does make them easier to inspire. Like objectively, it's easier for them to inspire. it may be easy enough. It may be so easy that you take one or both of the cards that allow you to desecrate, and then you hope that maybe you get one of those in the first round, and then um, are able to get your second one. But I don't know if it's enough to make me personally want to play this warband anymore. Because it doesn't. I mean, the desecration mechanic itself isn't really that much better. They're just easier to inspire. So that's kind of my take on it. There's just so many other similar warbands, like the four fighters, aggro, like the new orcs. I feel like are kind of overshadow these, and maybe the vampires as well. What do you think about that?
So I think that's a very, very fair comment to make, right? So I think this change happened for a couple of reasons. Number one, I completely agree that desecration isn't that cool or great, right? Um,
Yeah.
Initially, the idea, I think the concept is very cool. I think the ultimately the execution was that this isn't really stopping my opponent from scoring in phase objectives, but it's certainly stopping me, the Ravagers player, from scoring and phase objective based scoring, which is like path to victory,
Yeah.
dominant position. And when these guys first came out, those were some of like the big end phase scores we were all relying on, and to an extent, they still are today. So a
Yeah.
lot of people are like, well, these guys are locking themselves out of the most consistent and reliable way to score glory in this game. I'm not going to play with them.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? I think what this change does is that it makes it to where you can rely less on desecration. So if you like the warband, if you like the cards, if you like the fighters, you like the aesthetic, then hey, you can inspire faster. You can get Kagra and the other guy, Razek,
Razak. Yeah. Yeah.
Razek to 2 block pretty
Right.
quickly.
Right.
Especially, we mentioned some gambits. And I think that's really cool because effectively they are, at this point, an aggro warband. And yeah, Mad Mob, Crimson Court, hell, even Magor's Fiends might do it better in some instances. But if you want to play an aggressive, magic-oriented warband, then I think this could be a good option for you.
Yeah.
And so I look forward to messing with them myself. Do I think they're gonna like jump up to like A tier or B tier, if you will? No,
Yeah, that's true.
but they're better than they were, and I think that's important. That's the important part, I think.
Right. Yeah, they are. I think if you want to play them, this makes them way easier to play. Um, I just, I don't know. I think one of the interesting things about this season is that we have had so many four fighter warbands, and in general, they've done a really good job of making them all feel different. Um,
Yeah,
I think, at least to me, this is the one that is the least different. So maybe it just doesn't pique my interest. But if it did, then I would certainly welcome this change. Um, and I don't know if I have another change in mind that I feel like is definitely way better. So, well, I know people have thrown other ideas around, so maybe they'll try something else. But um, yeah, it's an interesting change. And again, it's nice to see that they recognize that this warband kind of missed the mark in some way and needs a
yeah,
little bit of help. So
which is awesome. And like you said,
yeah,
there are alternative ideas and feedback. You can always email them at whunderworlds@gwplc.com.
yeah,
And if this isn't a good enough change, or if more is required, then they could keep this change or change it, and then maybe do something to those desecration tokens. Maybe that's
yeah,
the flavor that's needing to be tweaked rather than the inspire. But play some games and find out. I certainly plan to.
yeah, yeah. I think there'll be some games when you inspire maybe in the second activation. So that
Yeah,
that does seem nice. So yeah, cool.
yeah, and without getting too far into the meta impacts,
Yeah.
actually we might come back to that. But I do think with the meta developing in the way it will, at least the
Hmm.
way that I anticipate it to, I think they've got some good game. And we'll talk about that more
Yeah.
as we talk about the FaR list. So those are
Yeah.
the only changes to the errata. Any other comments you'd like to make before we jump into the FaR list?
I do think it's interesting that we haven't had an FAQ. We just had the Errata update. So hopefully we get one of those soon. But yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
my only comment.
Yeah, the FAQ is one that's interesting. Arguably one document that is sorely needed, maybe more than a FAR list, but beggars can't be choosers, and so pretty happy that we got something, and I just hope that there's one around the corner.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I
I think
just know
there's a
there's a
lot of
few issues that we would like some clarification on. So
yeah, you've pointed a lot of them out to me actually, namely with primacy. So
yeah, I think that's the main one. So, but it
yeah,
shouldn't be, and I don't think any of it is game breaking. It's just, wondering how it actually works. So
yeah, yeah. Because if two people interpret it differently, then the way you play technically Mad Mob, for example, would be
yeah,
drastically different. So
yeah, yeah. So hopefully once, events start up, a lot more and for good, then we'll get one soon after that or right before that, something like that. So
yeah, yeah.
I guess if you have
Hopefully,
questions, be sure to email those in as well.
yes. Email those questions in, spam the inbox, let them know that we want change
Yeah,
and we need clarification and we would like some uniformity around primacy. So
absolutely.
okay,
But
well,
yeah, I think I'm ready
let's
for the
jump into
FAR
this.
list.
Let's do this FAR list. Okay, so again, list was updated in May 2021. All changes are in magenta, and so we get our first Forsaken card added to the list this season, and one strictly from the Dire Chasm set. It's card number 363, the Big Bad Ferocious Resistance. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I think if this was the only card that they added, I would have taken it.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
probably the most important one here. This card is just way too good on somebody that it can take like 4 or more damage and not die. It's just way
yeah,
too good at healing them back up. And granted, it doesn't do it every single time, but I think if something heals more than 2, that tends to mean you're gonna, cause at least 1 extra attack, something like that. Like you'll negate more than
yeah.
1 attack on average. So, um, incredibly powerful. I wish this happened the day after the box came out. So,
Yeah, honestly, I I completely agree. I've seen this card do some gnarly things. I've seen someone do 12 damage to a Hrothgorn, and Hrothgorn still was alive
oh my goodness.
because because of this card and other cards, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
it's crazy, man. And I will admit that part of the Malog Hrothgorn crushes problem, if you will, or
yeah.
challenge, was because of this card. And so
Hmm.
with this card going away, it makes it so much easier to not only take down bigger fighters, but then also it's now worthwhile to invest in attempting to take down those fighters because previously you could like drop Hrothgorn to 1 wound and then he would heal
Yeah.
up, right? And then
I,
not
I,
only is your damage wasted, but so is your activations.
Yeah, yeah. I've played against Hrothgorn decks that didn't even have ferocious resistance in there, but because I thought they probably did, like it wasn't the right choice for me to try to kill him. Like it's awful.
That's
So,
crazy. The fact that the
yeah,
card has just such a powerful
yeah,
uh, that's like that actually reminds me of the time where I was playing Tony in the Citadel Grand Clash final,
yeah.
and I never inspired any of my profiteers because I thought he had a worthy kill or a worthy deed. And then he was
Oh,
like, I was like, we played, I think, uh, 4 games, 5 games, and because I played him in the round of 4 as well, and he was
yeah.
just like, yeah. I think it was like the last game. I was like, you don't have this card, do you? And he just smiled and winked at me, and I was like, oh no. So
Yeah, because
it
the
was
profiteers gain wounds. Yeah, that's funny.
exactly. So it
Yeah,
was just like, it's just really funny that sometimes you can assume what cards your opponent is taking because that why wouldn't they?
yeah,
And even when they're not, you're still playing against or around them. Crazy.
yeah. Absolutely. So very happy to see that one Forsaken.
Yeah.
Nothing else was Forsaken, which I think makes sense. I don't know if I have any other candidates for that. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is the first time we've seen a card Forsaken because it was just very good. Every other card has had like a
yeah,
rules conundrum with it.
right.
Um, I guess maybe what's the one where you could charge twice
Well, that was
in
kind of a
Shades
rules
Play?
issue too. Time trap.
I'm trapped. That was, and so
Well,
was Great Concussion, because like no one knew from what.
yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Great Concussion, I think, was just busted.
I loved that card, so yeah.
It
Maybe
was
it was
difficult
the
to
year.
play. It was kind of like Mischievous Spirits in that, like, you go, all right, I'm gonna play it, and then you're like, okay, everyone has to. I'm gonna pick this one. Like, it was a lot of work, but
It was good with FaR Striders,
yeah, it was a cool card.
but yeah, it was fun. Okay, so keep in mind that the changes here today are mentioned for championship format and alliance format as well. Um,
Yeah.
no other format is mentioned, so not sure how this impacts Vanguard format, but we're going to assume that the cards translate over to Vanguard. Does
Hmm.
that make sense? These
Maybe.
restrictions. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to play Ferocious Resistance, go play Vanguard, I guess. But
Yeah, but you're also not playing Malog or Hrothgorn, so I guess that's fine. But
well, that's true. It's so easy to confuse between Vanguard and the unofficial Vanguard Plus format. So,
yeah, that's true.
but Ferocious Resistance with Kanan is pretty good. Just saying.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe they'll update
Let's
that one
get
as
into these.
well. So
Yeah, I think they just forgot to put Vanguard because they haven't ever done a list for Vanguard. So
yeah, makes sense.
one can only guess. Let's jump to the objective cards here. So usually we get a bunch of cards restricted in this section, but I feel like as of late, it's been more power cards, specifically more upgrades rather than objective cards.
Yeah.
But 3 of the cards here today, all surges. We'll start with Cover Ground. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting one. I think it's a useful one to be restricted. I think that the intention here is probably to reduce the power of the speed package. There's a few ways that I think that has been done in this update, which makes sense. I think I personally was a little surprised that they chose Cover Ground and not Gathered Momentum, because I think Gathered Momentum is a better card. But I guess Cover Ground can be scored passively.
Yeah.
Whereas like sometimes with Gathered Momentum, you actually can't score it because like you can't charge 5. Whereas Cover Ground, you can
Yeah.
pretty much always score. So I don't know. It's just an interesting, interesting that they made that decision. But in building my deck so far, I don't know if it's really affected that much. I probably don't take Cover Ground, but I don't know if you need it. With Gather Momentum and Winged to Death. So overall, I think it's an improvement, but we probably won't see too much more of it, which is probably good because I don't think you can find the Essentials pack in the wild anymore. So, or
Yeah.
not the
So they actually
Essentials pack.
mislabeled it. It's the gift pack.
Yeah, the
It's
gift
gift
pack.
pack number 3, not Essentials pack number 3. So,
Yeah,
because Cover Grind is not in the Essential pack, but
right.
I will say that I am actually really happy with the change, and I think it's specifically the reason what you mentioned was that Gathered Momentum forces a charge. There's also a hex limitation.
Yeah,
Whereas Cover Ground, I can technically move 1 hex over, but say I moved 6.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, which is kind of silly.
it is. It
I'm
is.
gonna charge and definitely move 6, and then
Yeah.
yeah,
And like the speed package, I think was just getting annoying at this point. It was just such a efficient option to take
yeah,
that I think not only was it easy to score, but also it's like stifling deck creativity. So now, you can still take Cover Ground, and I think I've built maybe 1 deck with Cover Ground in it as a restricted option.
yeah.
Um,
That's cool.
but Winged Death is a great replacement, and Gathered Momentum is still good. So
Right, right. Yeah,
very happy.
absolutely. There's just so many cards. Cover Ground is one of a number of cards you can score at the same time as other cards too. So
Yeah.
any reduction to that, I think, is an improvement. So
Yeah. Scoring Cover Ground, Winged Death, and Gathered Momentum in 1 activation, that was always nice.
yeah, and maybe Show of Force, maybe Surge of Aggression, maybe Swift Capture, whatever. So
Yeah, that's true. Well, you mentioned 2 of them, so yeah, the next 2 are Show of Force and Surge of Aggression. Is there anyone in particular you want to talk about first?
oh, I guess we can just go down the list. Show of Force.
Yeah.
This to me was pretty. I'm not surprised by this one. This is an amazing card. It's in almost every deck pretty far, and it will probably still continue to be in a lot of them. So yeah, I think it's worth a restricted slot.
Yeah, I think I'm really happy that this card is on this list.
Yeah,
Number 1, just for popularity's sake alone, as you mentioned, but secondly, it's just so passive. Um, Very rarely was I seeing anyone score this because they have 3 fighters in enemy territory. Yeah, it
Yeah.
happened from time to time, but I think the main point was like, I'm just going to put 3 upgrades on someone and score a glory for
Yeah.
them existing. I thought was pretty lame. Um, Certainly good in a competitive environment. So I think for those players who are looking to play a bit more passively, um, there are going to be more restrictions in play, namely like through show of first being one of the more powerful surges. But again, if everyone's using it, it's obviously good. So I'm glad it's restricted.
Yeah, I think I've said before that, like, from a design perspective, I sort of wish that it was separated out into two different cards,
Yeah,
because either condition on its own is good but has some weaknesses, but the two together make it like basically free in this, past the first round, and then
yeah,
sometimes you can score it in the first round too, and that's probably the only thing that balances it. But it's just so good in the later rounds, and you can score it for usually for doing nothing.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad that it's on there. I guess we can go to the next one, Surge of Aggression. This is another Diarchasm card.
Yeah, Surge of Aggression was an interesting card. I think very early on, people were like, "Oh, it's really easy to get primacy. You just have to one-shot somebody." And then even easier than that is to just because we have like bajillion +1 strength cards in the game right now, it's
Yeah,
easy to just eventually get through with an attack that hits for 4 damage, right? And
right.
this could even happen, um, as a reaction as well. So um, I thought it was just a really, really pretty strong card and one that I think will temper the again passive scoring that's can be taken in this game. Um, I actually don't think I've ever played a single game of Diarchasm without primacy. So again, super popular, super easy to score, pretty much auto include. But I think this is kind of like a soft nerf to spam damage and just go face, um,
Yeah.
which I think is important.
Interestingly, I'm kind of torn on this one because at the beginning of the season, this was basically like a worse version of like get a kill. Um, you
Sure.
know,
Yeah.
But as the season went on, with things like Proud Runner and some of the cards that give you primacy, it became less of that and became sort of a passive card in some builds, and things like that. So it's been interesting to see its evolution. Unlike Ferocious Resistance, I didn't immediately think, wow, this is a great, amazing, like, strong card. But now I think that we've seen the full set. I think it's worth a restricted slot in some cases, and worth a spot on the list. You think you would still take this one in a lot of decks, or are you going to try to find a replacement for it? And you think most of the time?
I think there are going to be some builds where you want it, just because, like Mad Mob, for example,
Yeah,
probably love this card.
yeah.
Um, and then maybe even Kagger's Ravagers with their new errata, um, or maybe warbands like Hrothgorn, who are going to be hitting at high damage consistently. Kanan
Hmm.
Reapers, for example, as well. But I also think it's more challenging to build without this card, and I actually don't think it's like an auto include. I think it was quote unquote an auto include because like it was just an option with no limitations. But now that it's restricted, I think people will look elsewhere. And I've built a couple decks now where I was like, do I want this card? I do, but I don't need it. And I think that was a really cool exercise just in itself.
Right. I think that if you think you're going to score this card off of the kill, then I think you probably don't take it. I think if you have other ways to score it, then you think about it, because then you open up the synergy of the kill or the other way.
Right.
So that's how
But
I'm thinking about it.
interesting thing is like some of the other ways to get it aside from kills have been limited, right?
Right.
Which we'll talk about in a moment. But
Yeah.
that's what
So I
that's why
think
I think
Mad
you're
Mob probably think about it the most, and then
yeah, for sure.
see from there. So that's it for objectives. We only have 6, and they're all surges. So interesting.
Yeah. Do you think any end phase cards should have been on this list?
Hmm. It's a good question. Um, I would say no. Like, I think Underdog is a really, really good card, but a lot of people
Yeah.
disagree with me on that. So that's probably the only one that I would even consider.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's usually just free glory, um, but I don't know if I'm right about that. Enough other people disagree with me, whose opinion I value that um, you know I'm willing to not
Yeah.
push very hard on that. But um, and I don't know. I would still probably say I wouldn't restrict it, but to me, that's the one that's like it's kind of just free. um, so, but yeah, I can't think of anything else. Can you?
Yeah, I would say that if there is one that could be hit, it would be dominant position.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's true.
Just because it's super popular in almost every deck or flexed into every deck when you can't think of enough cards to score at the end. And it's
Yeah,
sometimes super trivial to score.
it
Um,
is. Yeah, and there's some matchups where if the other player isn't playing objectives, then it's kind of free.
yeah,
So, I do like that there's some counterplay and like they know you're trying to get it, but there's some matchups where there's really just no way you're going to stop them. So I could see
yeah,
that, and I guess we could talk about we'll talk about what we think is good now that the changes have been made, and if objective play is really good, maybe we'll see that one in the future. So
yeah, for sure. But I guess
um,
yeah, let's get through these power cards.
yeah, there's a lot of them.
There's a bunch. There's a bunch of cards on this list. So I think there's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 15 universal cards.
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay. Amberbone Sword is the first power card on this list. I don't know
Yeah.
if we're too surprised given the fact that Mace already on the list, but what do you think?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. I mean, it's a great weapon. The mace is already restricted. This is almost as good, I would say. So why not?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's some great alternatives in the meta too
Yeah,
right now. So I don't know if this is. I think this is probably the least impactful card change
yeah,
because like Silent Sword and Swordbreaker are in the game.
right, right. I think this one has just started to fall off in popularity, so now I think you probably won't use it anymore. So
No.
let's go to the next one.
Crown of the Dead, and I'm going to go ahead and mention Gauntlet of Command as well
Yeah,
because this signals that all three Mortis relics are restricted.
yeah. I found this very surprising to see all three of them because basically, in my opinion, this means you're never going to take any of them. Because I can't think of too many situations where you take two, and by themselves, I don't think they're really worth it. Maybe in some cases one of them is worth it. I think I could see
Yeah.
command or dominance being maybe worth it, but I don't think we're going to see very much of these.
So I'm actually really happy all three got hit, and I'll tell you why. I think all three of those cards were too strong to begin with. Um,
Yeah,
I think we've identified numerous times over in this season alone that pushes are very strong.
yeah,
To be
that's
able
true.
to push your own fighters and other fighters, especially when Direchasm is like a semi-aggro, semi-positioning game, it's
Hmm.
just so powerful. And so I can see why Command was hit, and I think Crown of the Dead was hit because it was just too good with To the End. If you've noticed, every draw engine in this game has been hit, aside from Unnatural Truth and Duel of Wits, because
Yeah.
uh, To the End is just such an easy, reliable score. But
Mm.
they're not hitting To the End; they're hitting all the cards that help score To the End. So if you do want To the End, you're going to have to burn a restricted slot no matter what. You can't just take Crown, Unnatural Truce, and Duel of Wits anymore. You're going to have to invest a restricted slot. And I think that's probably why Crown was hit.
Yeah, and interestingly, even without to the end, hard draw is so good right now, and I think the reason that
Sure.
it's good is because of the quality of upgrades. I think you don't mind taking a gambit. I think the gambit quality is lower, or gambit power anyway is lower. So I think you don't
Yeah.
mind taking some card draw to have more upgrades in your hand, especially later game, which is an interesting like dynamic. But um, I think Crown of the Dead is. I think Gauntlet of Command is the one that I'm surprised to see hit, because I think on its own it's not as strong as the other two. Um, But it's fine. I think we just won't see very much of any of them. So, and I think they had. I guess they probably didn't get that much less popular because I think 2 of the top 4 at the recent online event actually used the set. So um, that's interesting.
The set is good when you only have to pay 1 restricted tax. I don't think you're going to
Yeah.
spend 2 slots for Mortis relics, and they
Yeah.
were just too strong to begin with. I think Arena Mortis, well, it makes sense why it happened, but they just had a lot of really good upgrades,
Right.
or rather, the good upgrades were too good, given the fact that it's a game mode that revolves around upgrades,
Right.
fighters coming back, and so the next card on the list is Deserve Confidence, which is
Yeah.
arguably the best card from Arena Mortis. So you see the top 4 upgrades from that set all restricted, um,
Yeah.
and all for good reason. How do you feel about Deserve Confidence getting hit?
Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, I don't think anyone would say that this one shouldn't be hit. I think this is one of the best cards in the game, just from a stat perspective. And it really has, I think, been a big part of the shaping the style of this last, most of this whole season of where you basically want to Voltron a powerful fighter. This card makes that so much better than it is already. That I just think I think it's a pretty obvious choice there. I'm not sure if I take it anyway, which is interesting. Do you think you take this card as a restricted card?
No,
Yeah, that's
I
been
don't think you
my.
take. I don't think you take this card anymore.
And I think the reason for that is there are a number of other ways to get +1 wound now. And
Yeah,
so the main reason you'd be taking it is for the +1 wound and the no push. And I'm just not sure if not being pushed is, or not being driven back is worth a restricted slot.
it's
Interestingly,
not.
because we've seen what's the one that puts you on guard? Survival instincts. We've seen that almost disappear. There's a few exceptions, but um, I think most people have decided that's not worth it either. So I just find that interesting how a card is like in every deck and then it goes restricted and maybe you don't see it anymore.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. Like +1 wound is great, um, and then the knockback with it is awesome,
Yeah.
right? But then you can replace that with Impressive Bulk, Great Fortitude, Scavenged Armor, and you're
Yeah.
spoiled for choices.
Right.
There's really no need to ever take this card moving forward.
Yeah. I think so. Um, Interestingly, yeah, I don't know. I almost think that maybe the guard is better now. So I don't know. It's curious. Um,
Well, being resistant to a push was really solid, I think.
I think that was like the best part about it. I just don't know
That
if it's
was the
worth a
best part about
restricted
it.
slot.
It's not.
So we'll have to see. I don't expect to see a lot of it though. The next one is very curious to me because I don't know if I've ever even seen this card played. Geomancer's Gauntlet.
So this is an interesting one, and my only assumption is that it's been hit because it's a preemptive hit to Feed the Beastgrave. I
Yeah,
think there was some real concern in the meta that Feed the Beastgrave was going to be something that was very strong and very powerful.
right.
And honestly, it was starting to get some traction with Hrothgorn because he's able to flip objectives, and then with the
Yeah,
Starblood Stalkers, with their ability to like transport all over the board and teleport based from the like Lost in Space and Time and etc. That they had some really good game into it as well, and we're seeing a lot of universal cards coming out that flip stuff. And if you
right.
don't prepare for Feed the Beastgrave, it can just take you out. And like
Yeah,
imagine if you're trying to score objective based scoring and then like 3 or 4 objectives are flipped. Well then you're not going to
yeah,
score anything. And so I think it was a very smart decision because Geomancer's Gauntlet can actually flip more than one. Um,
yeah. That's true.
right. So if you were able to position it, whether through a Symbiote's Call or through a Restless Prize, then you can, in theory, spend one activation, flip 2 objectives, 2 feature tokens, maybe even 3 as a dream, you know? And I think that's very strong.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure there was a potential abuse case there. So, yeah, just interesting. Not one I would have thought of. So,
Yeah.
next one is Haughty Resistance. One of the newer ones, I guess.
Yeah, Haughty Resistance is a really good card. So for those
Yeah.
of you who are not familiar with it, essentially you can stick it on a fighter. If they take damage, you get the primacy token.
Yeah.
Or you can discard the primacy token and just reduce the damage by 1. So bigger fighters were having like a renaissance, if you will, in the game. And so with them taking taking all those heals and reducing damage, it just became even more of a pain to eliminate them. And so
Yeah.
now it's going to be easier to take down some of those tougher fighters, and you can still invest in this card. I think it's a great option because it's another passive way to get primacy or deter an opponent from hitting you because you might give them primacy. But if they don't have primacy, then you can just one-shot them. So it is a balanced card, but one that I think was messing with the way people got primacy a lot. And I'm glad that we've seen it now go restricted.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't seen a lot of this one, but I can definitely see a lot of situations where it ends up being really powerful. This goes on Hrothgorn or Molag early. I think you just can't kill him. So
I don't
because
think I
the
ever
first time you
played
attack
against.
him, he's going to get primacy, and then he's like reducing everything.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played against like a Krusha, Hrothgorn, or Molag without this card.
Yeah.
Like it was just so good for them.
Yeah. Seems like you might as well take it. So, I guess we won't see much more of it. I would say you probably don't take this card, but maybe.
Maybe
Like
if you have a lot of like faction built-in wounds,
yeah.
or maybe you're you know just causing a deterrent to stay off, not tackle a fighter that's on an objective, then I think it could still see use. You definitely want ways to get multiple avenues to get primacy other than just killing your opponent. But yeah, it may not be worth the slot.
Yeah. Interesting. The next one I think is probably still worth the slot for at least one of our large friends is Hunter's Talisman. So I think I'm still going to take that in Hrothgorn. But
Yeah, Hunter's Talisman, and I feel like we should have been reading these cards. But
yeah, probably.
just in case people aren't aware with them, familiar with them, but Hunter's Talisman +1 dice. This fighter's attack actions. If the target is a quarry, you can reroll 1 attack dice on the roll, and it's restricted to a hunter. And the friend that Jonathan is referring to is Hrothgorn because he makes everyone a quarry. It's essentially +1 dice and reroll 1 attack action for all of Hrothgorn's attacks. And before you get into why this card is so good, I'm just surprised that it took him this long to hit this card.
Yeah.
Because the day it came out, I was like, why isn't this restricted? This card is ridiculous.
Yeah, it really makes Hrothgorn in particular pretty ridiculous. And it's really good for hunters in general. So
yes.
Interestingly, we have so much accuracy, it seems like, in the game right now with rerolls and things. Anyway, that like maybe other people don't need it, but for Hrothgorn, it was just amazing. So I think he could. Although I think he probably still takes it, but if he doesn't, there's other similar things he can take that like maybe only affect his range attack or only affect his melee attack. The fact that this affects both of them was just really silly.
Yeah, and every card that has a similar effect that's an upgrade, whether it's a reroll 1 dice or +1 dice, it's been restricted. This was the only one that never got restricted.
I think we still have limbs, augmented limbs.
Well, that one's new though. Like this article says May 20 something, so I think augmented limbs came out after that, but
I think you're right.
Aside from that, that's a good point though, is that like every other card has been hit, and then Hunter's Talisman for some reason was never hit because it was restricted to a hunter. Come on, that was ridiculous. I'm so glad it was just
Strength
silly.
of Terror has been hit for a while, and this one's better for Hrothgorn. So I don't know.
Terror came out after that card.
Yeah, I guess it's not like Hrothgorn's really been like, killing everything, but
I mean,
I don't know.
He did pretty well in the last event.
Yeah.
And his turret build is really good.
It's true.
It's got a very good turret build.
This is another one that's mislabeled as Essentials Pack, but it's
Yeah.
It's a gift pack card, and a card that has almost always been in the game.
True.
Mischievous
True.
Spirits. What do you think about that? I think this is a pretty big change.
It's a really big change, and actually, I I've got mixed feelings about it. Right, so I
Yeah.
think any card. So for those of you unfamiliar, Mischievous Spirits is a pretty much you and your opponent can pick an objective and move it 1 hex,
Right.
and then you take turns until they've all been moved. And
Yeah.
this card was really popular because it
Hmm.
stopped objective-based scoring. B, it pretty much I don't want to say gatekept objectives because like objective warbands are still doing well even with this card in the play. In fact, they were using it to help them score.
Right.
But if you weren't prepared for it, this could essentially ruin your end phase scoring.
Right.
So from that perspective, I can see why like this card was hit because it was very difficult to overcome in certain situations. My concern is that this card was also inhibiting some of those end phase objective scoring, and now I think it's going to be really easy to score in the end phase of holding objectives.
Yeah. It's actually a really interesting one, I think, as we've watched this season develop. Because at the beginning of the season, the only friendly push we pretty much had was sidestep.
Yeah,
And because of that, mischievous spirits against most objective warbands could really, really ruin their day. Because the way that it works, even if you have your own mischievous spirits, you still usually need 2 to 3 cards to counter an enemy mischievous spirits if it's played correctly. Um, and but I would say so. I would say in the beginning, mischievous spirits was almost single-handedly shutting down traditional hold objective play, which I would consider as like supremacy. Like if you're trying to hold
sure.
3 objectives. Um,
Yeah,
Towards the end of the pre-FaR season, I would say it was still shutting down supremacy, but we had other push cards like Heated Instinct, so that objective play was starting to come back. Like Tommy
yeah.
did really well in the recent online event with Thorns. Um,
But that's just
Although,
Tommy and Thorns, though,
yeah,
so we don't know
yeah,
how.
but
But I mean, Thorns are great right now, anyways.
yeah, that's true. But if you're a warband like Grimwatch, where you have your own really good double push, and then you have sidestep, and then
Yeah,
you have Heated Instinct if you want it,
yeah.
I think you're
You can
not
overcome.
as yeah. I think makes Path to Victory better, which we've talked about have kind of been falling off for us. Um, but I think Heated Instinct kind of changed that. Um, so I think this will be really interesting to see what objective play is like and what counter objective play is like um, now that this card is restricted. Interestingly, you can still take it. If you're worried about enemy objective play, you can take this, and if you do, there's probably a good chance that the enemy um, can't really recover it from it because they probably don't have their own mischievous spirits. They probably
Yeah.
just have pushes, and it is really, really good. And if you have this and distraction, you can probably mess up a scoring turn for an end phase objective holding warband. So um, I'm optimistic that this will be an improvement, but it's definitely a big change.
It's a very big change, and yeah, I'm optimistic as well. But I think we're just going to see a lot of end phase scoring via objectives now, and
Yeah.
as someone who prefers the game to be played a little bit more different, for lack of a better term,
Hmm.
that does concern me.
Well, I mean, if
I don't
this
know. We'll see.
allows supremacy to come back, um, I wouldn't hate that. I'm not sure if it will, but
I don't know if it does,
yeah,
but we'll see. We'll talk about it more as we get through.
yeah,
Let's just get through the list first, and then we'll talk about the meta. But
yeah. The next one is Proud Runner, a relatively new one, it seems like to me.
yeah, Proud Runner is a really good card.
Yeah.
Essentially, if you have a fighter equipped with this card, they get +1 move, and each time a fighter finishes a move action 5 or more hexes away from where they started, you get the
Mhm.
primacy token. But at the end of the end phase, if you don't have any move or charge tokens, you have to discard primacy. So essentially,
Yeah. Which I don't think I've ever seen that happen.
no, it got slotted in. It was pretty much like a put this in instead of Savage Speed for the speed package.
Right.
Because why not? It's a great way to get primacy.
Well, and it also
Um,
makes Surge of Aggression become part of the speed package.
That's true.
which
It
is really
did.
interesting.
Yeah, that happened a lot actually. So
Yeah.
really good card.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to take this in very many decks. Probably because Surge of Aggression is restricted as well.
So I think you still might take this card if you are a warband that's larger but weaker.
Yeah. I could
Because
see that.
they'll be farming you, and then you can still steal primacy.
Yeah.
And that might not score you a card, but it can certainly, flip your glory differential up by 1, which can add up at the end of a game.
Yeah. And it can still help you score Gather Momentum or Wing Death. So
Yeah.
if
Or
you're
even get on objectives.
yeah. Yeah. It's not bad. Okay. The next one is Savage Visage, which is, I believe, a reroll. Hold on.
Yeah, essentially this fighter's a hunter. You can reroll 1 dice in this fighter's attack actions for range 1 attack actions. And addition, you can reroll another dice for each instance of the hunter keyword.
Right. Yeah.
So
Very, very good.
essentially, if you've got Savage Hunter or sorry, Savage Strength and Savage Visage on and Savage Speed, you can reroll 3 dice because this card counts for itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's pretty good.
Yeah. Very good. Any card that can give 2 rerolls is 1 reroll might be worth a restricted slot. So, I do think it's nice that it's sort of balanced that it's range 1 only, because that usually means you're only going to get 1 use out of it per round, but still very strong. So, and it seems like they are cracking down on some of the accuracy. So,
Yeah.
I like that. Do you think we'll see this one, or do you just take Strength of Terror?
I don't think we're going to see this one much.
Yeah.
Unless there's like a bunch of hunter cards that work really well, and which I don't
Yeah.
know if we're going to see anymore since we've got the full core set out now, Dire Chasm. But
Right.
I could see it being taken, but I think Strength of Terror is a better option, 100%.
And currently, you would take Augmented Limbs instead. And
Correct.
maybe even Savage Soldier. So
Savage Soldier is really good too.
yeah,
It does improve your accuracy in a different way, but
right.
I think Augmented Limbs, which is essentially just a range 1 Strength of Terror, which is +1 dice to all range 1 attack actions, is pretty solid. Until that gets restricted, of course, right?
Right. Okay. Well, the next one is Slick Rock.
So I've got mixed feelings on Slick Rock, right? So for those of you unawares, Slick Rock was pretty much a reaction after an enemy fighter has a move action that ends in the same hex as an objective token. You can scatter 1 from that hex and push them in any direction of the chain.
Yeah.
If a fighter can't be pushed, you can't use it. And I think it was pretty fair. I think with Mischievous Spirits being gone, I think you would have seen more Slick Rock
Mm-hmm.
if it had
I think
stayed
so.
unrestricted. I think a lot of the issues with Slick Rock was that it was just NPE, or rather negative player experience.
Yeah.
Because anytime you do something and your opponent's like, haha, gotcha, it makes people angry in this game.
Yeah.
So whether it's Rebound or Daylight Robbery or Slick Rock, it's kind of the same theme of cards.
Yeah. I think that it's just a double whammy, because 1, you're not on the objective anymore, and you probably wanted to be, and then 2, if you were about to make a charge and make an attack, you probably can't do that anymore either if you don't have the range. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really
Half the
good.
time it could ruin charges. Yeah.
We didn't see a ton of it, I think, because objective play wasn't like that everywhere. But I think you're right. We would have seen more of it. So I'm not sad that it's gone. So, or that it's restricted. I don't think I would spend a restricted slot on it now. It'd be pretty rare.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those cards that it's gone because it just wasn't fun to play against.
Yeah, I think so. The next one is Sting of the Urgrub. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so this is a really, really interesting one. Sting of the Urgrub is +1 damage to any range 1 attack actions. If you have 3 or more Urgrub, then you become the Avatar, right? It's like Mandibles and the Claws. So I think this is a really, really big hit, and it's a very clever and calculated restriction. So first of all, you're reducing the amount of damage in this game, which it needed to be, right? by itself, it was just pretty much a range one great strength. There are other
Right.
cards like Sparrow Symbiote that have downsides, but this one did not.
Right.
Number two, the fact that it hurts the Avatar Risen strategy, which means now out of the 4 cards you would take, including the Avatar Risen, and the 3 Urgrob aspect upgrades, you now have to spend a restricted slot, which is again a hit towards control and passive play, which we weren't seeing too much of that, but I can see this being a proper preemptive strategy, especially because like Urgrub was going on all crushes and half the Mollog and Hrothgorn decks, which I think this list has really toned down the big boys, which were priority uno. At least it seems like for Games Workshop, based on like how critical the community was of those larger warbands or larger fighter warbands.
Yeah, in general, I think this list has hit a lot of the Voltron nature of what the season has been like.
Yeah.
So I think this one makes sense. I think that if you're looking for damage, it's pretty easy to find an alternative.
Yes.
So the main change here is the makes the avatar a little bit harder to do. I do like though that now when you are taking damage, most of the other damage upgrades are at least a little bit situational, whether it's Savage Strength or Glory Seeker or the other Fighter's Ferocity, blah blah blah. So it's interesting.
Because I mean, like they all have downsides, right? Like you lose the defense on Savage Strength. Feral Symbiote is you can damage yourself if you use it too early.
Right.
Glory Seeker doesn't work against certain fighters. Fighters Ferocity only on a crit, so
yeah,
I like it.
Yeah, that's fine. Next one is Substance Siphon. Very interesting one. This is not
Yeah.
when it came out. This is not one that I would have thought would be restricted. But I think that because of the Voltron nature of the game, it makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. So essentially, if your fighter's characteristic is dodge X, where X is the round number, and you can't be
Yeah.
modified, you can't re-roll any dice. So a lot of the times you stick this in the 3rd round, and your 1 block or 1 dodge fighter is now a 3 dodge fighter, which could be go on guard as well. So what you'd
Yeah.
see is you'd see like Voltron fighters who are just pretty much unkillable, or maybe they have Avatar or Lost Pages on them, and it's really infuriating to not feel like you can't even do anything to take down a fighter. And so by restricting this card, I think it's while the card will probably rotate soon, I think like a Mollog with Substance Siphon on guard is is ridiculous. It shouldn't
Yeah.
exist, and it kind of was in some instances. So
Yeah, and I forget the name of the card, but the one that puts you on guard if you're holding an objective.
Dominant Defender.
Yeah, that one's pretty popular as well, and those two have some amazing synergy with each other.
Yeah.
So even in the second round, Substance Siphon starts being worth it if you were like 1 dodge or 1 block. So it's an interesting pick that I wouldn't have suspected, but I don't hate it. And that is it for the universals.
Yes, but not yet for all the cards.
No, sir.
So it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 faction cards.
Yep.
We're going to go ahead and be taking a look at the restrictions here, and as you can imagine, these are all pretty popular warbands and warbands that have kind of enjoyed their time at the top of the food chain, if you will, and so probably see them get knocked down a couple pegs, but that's not a bad thing. So let's start with Lady Harrow's Mournflight, a warband that historically, since their inception, has been very powerful, namely due in part to the fact that they were like the first warband with 2 dodge everywhere, and people started realizing that it's pretty decent, has a pretty good chance of rolling crits, and then furthermore, they can cycle and score surges like no one's business. So no surprise here that we see Fleeting Memories get hit. For those of you unaware, Fleeting Memories is essentially for this immediately when a friendly fighter finishes a move action and enter 2 more different hexes that contain an objective during that move action for 1 glory. It's a surge. What do you think, Jonathan?
I think that this makes sense. I think that Lady Harrows are or were and probably still are pretty powerful, and I think that this is a good card to hit. They just have a number of cards where they sort of just have to move, and most of them can be scored together. So I think this tones their power down a little bit. I think cover ground going restricted affects them as well. So
Yeah,
between those two
100%.
things, I think that's a pretty decent hit to their power. But um, in general, I would say they're still very playable. I would say.
I agree. I think the warband is still a very good warband to play. Um,
Yeah.
it just means that now you have to make more deliberate decisions when it comes to your restricted pool, and your surges aren't necessarily auto scores. Which
Yeah.
again, you can take fleeting memories, right? You can take one will, which is a restricted card, and take cover ground, and you're still going to
Yeah.
have an amazing deck that can score a lot of glory, and you've got great, faction cards and fighter statistics that can help you win the day, but you might be losing out on some of those cooler or more niche tools. That's just a decision you have to make, and I think it's good that Heroes players now have to make that decision.
Yeah, and I think there's still plenty of options like branching fate. I think is good for them, and
Yeah,
that's relatively
sure.
new,
Yeah,
so I think they'll be okay, and this makes sense. So
yeah,
um, go to the next one. We haven't seen any of this Warband's cards hit yet, so this is the first one. Rippa's Snarl Fangs and Cruel Hunters.
yeah. So Cruel Hunters is a duel for 2 glory. Score this in the end phase if 2 or more friendly or enemy fighters are out of action, and 1 or
Yeah.
more friendly fighters are in enemy territory. Um, I have actually thought this card needed to be restricted since Beastgrave. This is a very, very good card. Probably one of the strongest end phase cards we've seen. Um, and I think it's really important that it's a duel as well because it kind of helped Rippa Snarlfangs happen to set the tempo a lot, which is
Yeah.
a passive way to score more glory. It's a glory multiplier. Set the tempo is essentially 3 glory. Um, it's a duel. Score this in the end phase if you score 2 or more duels, 2 or more hybrids, and a total of 6 or more objective cards.
Yeah.
So pretty
And
good for
now,
them. And
oh, sorry. I was going to say, now that we're at the end of the second season with duels and hybrids, it's pretty easy to make a deck that has like at least four of each, probably.
yeah,
So,
and we see set the tempo a lot, but I think
yeah.
it was just trivial with Ripple Snarlfang. So it's a very again smart and calculated selection here because
Yeah.
we're reducing the strength of a warband that has consistently done very well. After midway through Beastgrave, and then you know reducing their efficiency at scoring set the tempo as well. So
Yeah.
I
Also,
don't.
when you look at the number of other objectives that this ones can score alongside in the end phase,
Yeah,
um, I think that makes it a good pick.
I think so. I think Rippas were one of those few warbands that escaped the FaR list somehow, but the fact that they got second at the World Team Championship singles event, and then they, have won a Grand Clash as well as done really well on online events, it just was a matter of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that they didn't lose a lot of other things that they like to take in this update. I guess you could take cover ground with them. Um, but I think that might be about it. So,
Yeah, I mean, Cover Ground, Deserve Confidence, like those were good cards for
yeah,
them for sure.
that's
Show of
true.
Force even, but
Yeah, that's true. Show Force because
Hunter's
they like the
Talisman.
upgrades. Yeah, I don't know if I saw a lot of Hunter's Talisman on them, but it's not a bad one. I think they'll be fine. I think I think they still have plenty of options. So,
Yeah,
um,
they're still a great warband and very very viable and can still win events. It's just
yeah, yeah, we
they have
saw a
to
lot
make
of
one
them in
hard
the
decision.
Alliance format as well.
Yeah, it's because they've got great faction cards, and so um,
Yeah,
we should see that be reduced. But speaking of another warband that has a lot of good faction cards, um, we're going to see Hrothgorn's Man Trappers get their third faction restricted card. Now
yeah.
they've equaled the Boogie Bull, which are Thorns. Um, but this is an interesting card. This is Arm of the Everwinter. For those of you who aren't aware, it's a surge for 1 glory. Score this immediately when your warband removes a feature token from the battlefield or flips a feature token. So
Yeah, it's a very
uh,
good card for them.
it is, but I feel like we haven't seen it much lately, unless you're playing Feet of Beastgrave.
Yeah, that's true. Um, I don't know. I think there's a couple ways to play Hrothgorn, or there were a couple ways. There are so many cards that he can play that just need him to kill something, which are good options. So I think that really the only reason that this must have been restricted must have been for Feed the Beast Grave. Um, they must have been afraid of that. It is a really good
Yeah.
card. It is a good way to passively play Hrothgorn, or it has been in the past. So um, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think you take it, because I think if you're going to take a surge with him, you're going to take Unexpected Cunning. So okay.
Yeah. I think I think reducing the passivity that Hrothgorn has is important.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely looks like this is a targeted. Like, how can we kill two birds with one stone? And that is Hrothgorn, and then feed the beast grave, which he just so happens to be pretty good at.
Yeah. And I don't know how many, like, you know, I don't know how far ahead they were thinking, but I guess I could see that if they with the heals toned down a little, at least a little bit, with the forsaken nature of ferocious resistance, maybe they were afraid that Feed the Beast Grave Hrothgorn would become like oppressive. So
Yeah.
just getting ahead of that, maybe. Um, but yeah, I think it's fine. I think Hrothgorn probably is more annoyed at Hunter's Talisman and assertive aggression than the other one, than this one. But we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, I think if you're playing Hrothgorn in a turret aggro or aggro build, then
Yeah,
you're not worried about this restriction. But I think any sort of passive build or feed the beast grave deck would be concerned. But again, I think that's the point.
yeah, exactly. Speaking of warbands with 3 restricted cards,
That's right.
we have the Crushes. So they had Got It Boss and Berserk Fortitude restricted.
Yeah, just for holistic purposes, Guided Boss, 1 Glory Surge, score this immediately after an activation. Your warband holds 1 or more objectives in enemy territory. And then the other one is Berserk Fortitude, which is a reaction. It's a gambit. After your fighter gets attacked, before the deal damage step, you can remove any number of law counters, and the attack action has -1 damage for each counter removed to a minimum of 1. So if you had like 5 law counters, you can make a 5 damage attack, only deal 1 damage.
Yeah, yeah, very
Pretty
very
gnarly.
strong card. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What do you think about this?
So I think this is very, very rightly deserved. So I think crushes when they first came out were a little odd, because everyone's like, oh, they're big green orcs and they should be really good at fighting. But given their faction kit, they were actually better at just holding objectives and stacking upgrades.
Yeah.
And um, over time, um, they slowly transitioned into a warband that like scored while passively marching up the board, jumping onto objectives with Morgoth's very strong fighter action. And
Yeah.
then once they stack their glory and they get the upgrades and improve their accuracy, they just kind of finish the fight, if you will.
Yeah. The
And I
healing
think,
and everything.
yeah, and even like brutal charge is a great card. Like if you hit on 3 Fury, but now you hit on 3 Fury and 3 Smash, pretty solid.
Yeah.
And 2 of their fighters do 3 damage. So they had like a kit that was really good at both things, but for some reason was better at being more passive. And then there was a blend, right, as we got closer, or right now in the middle of dire chasm. But I think the biggest issue with them is that they were scoring like Hidden Purpose, Got a Boss, and Now What, which is a faction version of Hidden Purpose, very very easily, and that was kind
Yeah.
of silly because like there are warbands like Eyes of the Nine, or even like you know I don't even know, like Chosen Axes, who like could use those cards, but they weren't getting such easy cards to score, and they had nowhere near the fighter stats. Um,
Yeah.
so I really like how I think we all knew that Got It Boss or Now What was going to be hit, and I think I'm kind of glad it was Got It Boss, because now it kind of forces the Crushers player, like, do you want to play more passive or do you want to play more aggro? And it's like,
Yeah.
or you can kind of do both, but you're not going to be as good as maybe taking damage or dealing damage or accuracy or movement. And I think that's important given the fact that they can kind of do everything before this FaR list, or they could at least.
Right. Yeah. I think that makes sense. This one, I mean, this is definitely easier to score. because it only needs one objective to be held.
That's true.
So I think that makes sense. I guess I could see that maybe it makes Crusher players lean more into the defensive side. But I think other changes um, with this FaR list have maybe made that not as good, not quite as good either. So
Yeah.
with the gauntlets and different things going restricted, and the healing is hit as well. So I
Yeah.
think it makes sense. I think Berserk Fortitude as well is just a very strong card. I don't know if it has been in every successful Crusher deck, but I think that it definitely would have replaced Ferocious Resistance and might still replace it because I do think it's a good card. So it'll be interesting to see how the Crusher players adapt to these changes.
Yeah, I think Berserk Fortitude is just silly given the fact that it's three five wound fighters.
Yeah.
You know, with all this healing and damage reduction. Like Inure to Pain was the first card hit, which was arguably actually it is stronger.
Yeah.
So like the fact that you can reduce damage when your fighter is already hard to kill
Right.
seems like it was a little bit too much in some instances.
Yeah, because of the way in this game things kind of stack on top of each other, it's
Yeah.
I would say a Nerd to Pain is worth one restricted slot if you have Berserk Fortitude to back it up, and then you have two ways to do that for one restricted slot. And now two ways to do that for two restricted slots may not be worthwhile, but definitely seems more balanced if you do decide to, spend the restricted slots on that. So, um, I think I'm looking forward to that. Um, but yeah, that's the crushes, and we
That's
just
the
have one
crushes.
left.
And we have one left, and as if the guy wasn't having a bad enough day
Yeah.
with all these cards that specifically targeted his category of fighter, as well as the errata earlier today. We see Foul Temper get restricted from Malog's mob. Foul Temper is an upgrade that essentially allows him to reroll one dice in all of his attack rolls for his fighter attack actions.
Yeah.
What do you think about this one?
I mean, this is a really good one for Molag. It's always been kind of a nightmare when he puts it on. If it's the first round and he gets foul temper, you're just like, oh no, it's gonna be one of those games. I think that especially when we had this one and um, Strength of Terror, there's just so much accuracy for him. Um, I am interested to know what Molag players will do um, in the future to get their accuracy, like where those restricted slots will come out. I'm not really sure, but I think that going forward, this makes sense that this would just be, I mean, this is an incredible card on the
It's a very
most
good card.
powerful fighter in the game. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I think Moloch players just won't play him in the future.
maybe, maybe,
But if they are, then yeah. I mean, I think Foul Temper is worth a restricted slot. You pretty much are playing a
yeah,
one fighter warband, so
right,
giving him that accuracy buff is much needed, and definitely improves your dice odds. Um, so I can see a Moloch player taking. There's a lot of cards right now that reward you for just eliminating like the enemy leader or being a leader and killing stuff. So
yeah,
like Bold Conquest, Savage Exemplar, etc. So you can literally just take a healing potion, Spirit Comb as some heals. You can take Strength of Terror, Foul Temper, and then maybe I don't know, like another accuracy or maybe wound card,
yeah,
or like a Restless Prize to like stop objective scoring, and you're fine. You're still gonna half the time you'll still like wipe the opponent like half their warband off the board. Like it's just Mala.
yeah.
It's what he does.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger change obviously is the change to his inspired side, but I mean, it's not like he still can't make attack actions. He's still going to push around. He's still going to push you around, um,
Yeah.
and then he can still attack, push, attack, and then charge. Like so, I mean, it's not like he's completely useless.
No,
Um,
he's not. I mean,
so
you could make him. You can give him Strength of Terror, makes him a quarry. You can play Heated Instinct, so you can push him twice. You have
yeah,
Commanding Stride. You can push him 3 hexes. You have Sidestep. You have Hungry Advance. I mean, there's so many like, yeah, you have to be deliberate with your choices, but if you take like 6 push cards, you're still going to go where you want to go,
I mean, looking
right?
at this list, like, and just thinking about how I would play Moloch right now, I think I would do Foul Temper, Surge of Aggression, and I don't know, probably Strength of Terror, and that would probably be fine.
It is.
So
It sounds fine to me.
yeah, yeah. Then double
Um,
distraction and all his other stuff. So
yeah. Well,
um,
maybe you take Nightmare in the Shadows,
maybe.
but I think that's restricted. But
Well, there's the
yeah,
new one,
distraction,
Hypnotic Buzz,
hypnotic
and
buzz.
yeah,
Yeah, you got plenty of options if you're playing Mala.
yeah.
Just
So
just don't play them
yeah,
though.
just don't
Is
play
what.
'em.
So that concludes all the updates and changes to the game. Lots of good changes, lots of awesome changes, and I think everyone's really excited and refreshed for the game. I know it's made you a lot more interested in playing it. I've had a lot of fun deck building, and I've heard some really great things just from the people I speak to, that
Yeah,
they're having more fun and they're thinking that the changes are really nice. So looking forward to seeing how they impact the wider meta and the online meta and the local metas and how they affect competitive play. But we can
yeah.
always make some guesses, and so I think it's important to kind of anticipate where the meta could potentially be going. So I think you alluded to earlier that we think that objective. Well, actually, we've both been saying this. Um, yeah, we think some of the biggest winners here are objective-based warbands. Um, do you agree with that, or what's your thought process? How do you think the meta is going to look?
Hmm. So I'm actually not sure. I partially because I haven't been playing as much as I would like to, being
Yeah,
busy with some other things. I've been playing locally, but I haven't had the time to really get the reps in that I would like, to be up on it. Um, so I'm not sure, but I've seen a number of people say that they think that, objective play is back. So I'm excited to A, try objective play again, and then, um, B, get back into the meta some more. So I can see why people would say that they think it's back, because the warbands that I would think of, like Thorns and Grimwatch, and maybe even the Reapers, are good at doing what they do, and we have a lot more pushes in the game right now with Heated Instinct, and then Mischievous Spirits going away. Um, maybe maybe they will be better, um, at it. But I still think that there's a lot of things, um, in the game right now that are really still very good against objective play. We have Mighty Swing in the game. I think if you take that, like if Thorns are good, I'm going to take Mighty Swing because I'm just going to be able to kill.
right.
I'm going to be able to get kills with it. Um, and you can still take Mischievous Spirits, I think. And I think with the way that the surges are, if I make a Thorns deck, I think I'm going to take, um, probably at least 2 of Hidden Purpose, Scrum, and Temporary Victory, I think. And then, um, same with Grimwatch. And so I don't think they're going to be able to fit Mischievous Spirits. So I think there's enough counterplay with all the pushes. Like you can take Distraction, you can take Hypnotic Buzz, you can take a lot of tools. So I guess my hope would be that objective play is back and powerful enough to have to like have a plan for, um, but not as crazy as it was like at the start of the last season in Beastgrave. So that's what I'm thinking we're going to see. Uh, as far as objective play goes. But like primacy is just really good against objective play. It usually means 1 or 2 glory that the objective players don't have. And with the restriction of, what is it? Proud Runner, I think the objective warbands are going to have less ways to steal it back. So I don't know. There's so much math to do in your head with the meta stuff when anytime there's these changes. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes sense. So I've been playing a lot lately, and I've tried to stay, uh, up to date with how people are playing and stuff, and just like playing online in events, even though if I'm not necessarily like trying to try hard them as much as I used to in the past. And I think um, one thing that I've really definitely identified is that I think the biggest winners from this FaR list are objective-based strategies. I think with Mischievous Spirits and Slick Rock being restricted, I think with Primacy being knocked down a peg, or at least tempered, we're going to see like these strategies just become exceedingly more reliable than they ever have been. I don't know if we're going to be at Beastgrave era's level of importance in terms of objective strategies, but we might be close. And I really think it's just because there's a lot of ways to score off holding objectives, whether it's dominant position, path to victory, or some of these other cards. And then there's hidden
Absolute
purpose, but there's
stillness.
also absolute. Well, yeah. Well, I was going to get to that, but just jumping on the surges real quick, like there's another surge right now that rewards you for holding 3 objectives. I forget the name of it. Is it Fleeting Primacy?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes. So I think it's very easy to take Temporary Victory and Fleeting Primacy and get like 3 glory. Very easy. Even with Grimwatch, you can take In the Name of the King, and that's very easy glory that's attainable. And then we jump into the quarry stuff. You have Absolute Stillness. You have Lie in Wait. It's really good being a quarry. There's some great quarry upgrades like Cryptic Companion, Survival Instincts, Silent Helm. And I think you've got this like kind of this semi-perfect recipe where objective warbands are going to do really, really well. You've got a ton of pushes, which conversely, I think because objective play is going to do better, and we've seen big boys kind of take a hit. When big boys play, they're going to have trouble competing with the objective warbands level of glory generation. But I think the important part to remember is that when objective play gets better, aggro gets better, because then they can hunt and farm these larger and weaker, presumably weaker warbands and fighters. And so we are going to see an influx of Crimson Court, Mad Mob, Godsworn Hunt, Wild Hunt, and Drapors who like to get in your face and like to fight you.
That's a warband that we haven't really talked about. The creepers, the Drapors creepers. But I think they really like playing the larger objective warbands with the small fighters.
Yeah. Well, I think they're the best warband in the game. They're pretty much untouched. They lost deserved confidence, and I don't know.
That's about it.
That's about it. Like they are going to be top dogs for a long time. So you need to figure out how to take them down, or at least be able to mitigate what they want to do. Because until we see a new FaR list, like I don't see anyone coming close to like their level of consistency and ability to play well in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing.
I think their biggest weakness prior to this was the very high health warbands, and I think it's obvious that those took a pretty big hit. So I think even though maybe they liked Show of Force and maybe they liked Strength of Terror, they could still probably take those, and I think they got a net gain from most of this. But it also seems like from the timing of all this stuff says May, it seems like they may not even have been considered. So.
Yeah, I mean, we can only assume, but I think it's a very fair assumption to make. If this was supposed to come out in May, and those releases were in May, historically, FaR lists never take a look at current, meta. They always take a look at previous releases. So who knows? Who knows, right? But hopefully, we'll see another change. Or maybe an errata, because the patrician is insane and we haven't seen a FAQ yet. So who knows? But I definitely think objective is back with a vengeance. I think my top 3. It feels like Grand Alliance Death it's a full moon right now. Like they're on the rise. Nagash is very happy because I think Drapors, Thorns, and Grimwatch are like 3 of the best warbands in the game, and they're the ones to beat. Sure.
Yeah.
Hot take.
Yeah. No, I think that I definitely agree that Drapors seem like they are very strong. I'm interested to see how good the Grimwatch and Thorns do, because I wonder if Primacy is enough to, counteract it. It may not be, so we'll see. That's interesting. It's interesting. I think that everything else. I found most of my decks, and the decks that I've been playing recently have been mostly Dire Chasm warbands. I feel like they don't really mind a lot of these changes. Like, yeah, I had to take out some
No,
cards, but I can still play the way I want to play in general. It just may not be as quite as good, but in general, everything else, got a little bit of worse too. And then the stuff that seems like was specifically hit on purpose, um, got better. So, um, I'm interested to see how, the warbands like the lizards and the reapers and the mad mob kind of are in the next couple events and stuff, because
yeah.
I think that they didn't really lose that much. A lot of my decks went from like 3 to 5 restricted cards. So
I think one of the good things about the Dark Chasm Warband specifically is that they've got a lot of built-in support for whatever they're trying to do in their own
yeah,
faction kit.
yeah,
So when we see changes like these, we're not going to see too much impact unless we're specifically targeting Dark Chasm
yeah.
faction-specific cards, which I don't think we've seen any Dark Chasm Warband get hit yet. Um,
No,
but
no.
I think Reapers are still going to do great. I think Rippas are going to do great. I think Starblood Stalkers are going to do great. I think Crimson Court and Purifiers are going to do great. I think Dread Pageant in the hands of a really, a skilled player can do great. I think the only warband from Dire Chasm that I feel like is the most lacking is Mad Mob, and that's only just because they've got a pretty one-dimensional strategy, and
Yeah,
Primacy is a little wonky right now. But if they can clarify how Primacy works, I wouldn't see them like jumping up to the, to hang out with the rest of the crew, or at least their seasoned compatriots. But I also think like the spoilers got a big buff.
mm,
Grass spoilers because they love holding objectives and they love pushes. Um, I
yeah,
think Zarbag's Gits looking pretty solid, especially with Pure Carnage coming back. So I think,
yeah. That's true.
Sepulchral Guard look more interesting. Spyclaw Swarm look good. So these are all warbands that don't mind holding objectives. Um, then of course I think the biggest, even though Heroes, Craftcorn, and Morgok got hit, I think they're still great warbands, and I think they're still going to do well. So overall, it's more of like the gap between warbands is decreased.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's what we
But
always want to see in any of these updates. Like, smooth out the balance a little bit, and then make us think about how to build decks again.
yeah,
So
100%.
yeah, yeah, some
Yeah,
good changes.
super happy with it. Honestly, I'm very very happy. Um, anything else you want to add, like meta impacts or anything like that, before we jump into some couple Patreon questions?
Um, I don't know. I think maybe the only thing I would add is I think that I might like the Mad Mob a little bit more than you do. I played some games with them this past week, and some of the some of their cards are really, really, really good. I guess we'll
Sure.
have to
Yeah.
see. Like the Lucky Bone is incredible, and then the Strange Portents, which switches all the defense and attack dice. Those two cards are so good together, and apart. Um, I had a lot of fun playing them, and I was playing them with Set the Tempo, and they're really good at that too. So I scored a lot of glory for having all my fighters in enemy territory, and then I scored Set the Tempo, and it worked a lot better than I thought it would. So I'm excited to try them a little bit more than I was initially. So,
Yeah.
but I'm not
No, I
saying
completely agree.
you're wrong, but
No.
I
It's
was just
important to
surprised.
disagree.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's important to disagree. And I think I don't think you're wrong at all. I think they're pretty easy to predict what they're going to do.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
That's true. I
like
just think if
unlike
you're playing the aggro, I think I like them better than vampires, but maybe aggro's not the way to play them. So
well, so I definitely
that's
think aggro
interesting.
is the way to play them. It's just like, as I mentioned, predictable. Whereas like Crimson Court, they might have other tricks up their sleeve where you're not necessarily sure how to react, right?
Right.
Until they've revealed their game plan. But I would say like 9.5 times out of 10, the Mad Mob are going to charge you,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that may
So
be the edge that the Crimson Court have over them. Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
that's just my thought.
Um,
Probably just very brief, but
yeah. No,
let's jump.
I think that's true.
Let's jump into some patron questions. So
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
first question from Dylan Paul, who is one of our aspiring champions. He says, it's looking like hold objective play styles have had some weight lifted off their chests with the new FaR. Do you think it's enough to bring supremacy back into the question, or do you feel the aggro primacy push is still making everything, or making anything more than a hold two strategy too risky?
Yeah. It's interesting. Recently, I was looking at my Gits deck that we talked about a week or so ago, and seeing
Yeah.
how to upgrade it to the new list. And I actually did think about whether or not I should put in supremacy. I think right now, though, there are enough other options. But I could see taking it out instead of maybe pure carnage, because they're both 3 glory and they're both kind of hard to do in their own ways. But I don't think I would want to take both of them. There's just so many good end phase cards, like between underdog and dominant position, path to victory. That's 3, and then I feel like you can find some other ones. But I think you could try it. I don't. I think it's much better than it was before. So I'm not sure. I still kind of lean no, but you could take Glorious Triumph. That would help. So I don't know. I think you could try it, and I like that idea. You know, I like the fact we're talking about it.
Yeah, that's important. The fact that we're having the conversation, I think, is relevant for sure. Personally, I think for lack of a better, for better or for worse, it's always going to be too slow moving forward. I think we have adjusted as a community to holding more or holding 2.
Yeah.
And there's not much point in getting on that third objective unless you're trying to inspire, which is the Starblood Stalkers. Now, granted,
That's true.
everything to prove, temporary victory in the name of the king, those cards still exist. But it's easier to hold an objective for 1 activation than it is for a whole round, right?
Right. And if you were going to take supremacy, I would spend the restricted slot on Restless Prize. And
Yes.
then that is taking away from the surges. And that may actually be the biggest factor now that I think about it, is for most of those warbands, I want to take 3 restricted cards in my surges.
Yeah.
And that means I probably can't afford Restless Prize. If I did take Restless Prize, that would make supremacy look better to me. Because I don't think we're going to see that much Restless Prize from the enemy. So in general, if you take it.
Well, let me ask you this: like, you take Restless Prize, you take Supremacy. Someone plays Mischievous Spirits. I just invalidated your restricted card and probably stopped you from scoring 3 glory.
Right. But what percentage of decks that you face in a tournament do you think will still have Mischievous Spirits? 25%?
I played a game earlier this morning. They had it, and then I was talking to, some of our friends, and they were saying that one of them took Mischievous Spirits and the other one took Restless. So I think it comes down to preference, but I guess for me, it's 2 out of 2 today.
Yeah, that's true. If that's the case, then I don't think we'll see it as much. If the meta shifts more towards, something else, but I guess I think that if objective play is back in a real way, which it seems like it is, then the counter to that and the tech that people take to counter it will make supremacy a little bit too hard, and that means it will stick to the hold 2. But it's hard to say. So
I think it's the pushes that are the biggest culprit. You've got Nightmare, Distraction, Hypnotic Buzz, Center of Attention. So many cards: Mischievous Spirits, Universal or Restless Prize, Symbiote's Call, Living Land. There are just so many gambits right now that can hurt objective play. So
if you want to,
will always be difficult.
Yeah, if you want to mess it up, then you can.
Yes.
But there's also a lot of support for it between, let's say you take a Restless Prize and you take a Quickening Greaves and you take a Sidestep and you take a Hidden Instinct, and then maybe you have a faction version, like some of them do. I don't know. I'm really not sure. I just think there's enough other options. You don't need supremacy, but I guess that's where I'm going to settle for that question.
I think that's another good point. You don't need supremacy.
Yeah. You just
don't need 3 glory.
I do wonder if keys might come back.
No.
No?
No, I don't see it coming back. Maybe Dean Bills can prove me wrong, but I don't see it coming back.
Yeah. Okay. Next one is from Schmooves. I can never say that.
Smoothness.
Smugness. I
It's
can never say
smoothness.
smoothness. One of our glory seekers. The FaR list is dated May 2021, which shows us that it is a bit dated. What do you think is the reason it was held back? Why is the Essentials pack not included? Which cards that need to be on the restricted list weren't touched by the list? Duel of Wits, anyone?
A lot
That's
of good
interesting.
questions.
Yeah.
So I think we talked about maybe it was being so it being listed as May 21 shows it is a bit dated. Sure. Maybe it was delayed. Maybe it was supposed to come last week of May, and instead it
Yeah.
comes like second week of June. You know, you never really know, or third week of June. Games Workshop's corporate entity, and they've got their own schedules and their timelines. And I'm sure when things don't go to plan, they have to make adjustments. So for whatever reason, I'm sure there were some delays. There's been a lot of job postings online as well for Games Workshop. There's been a lot of shuffling from some of my friends who work within the company. So you know, we don't know, honestly, but I would
Yeah.
just say that normal delays that any corporation would have, and maybe someone just didn't edit May into June, right?
Right. Yeah, that
But I don't know.
that could be the simplest
That could just be
explanation. Yeah.
yeah, it could be the most reasonable too. So who knows? But I think the important thing is it's out. That's what we should focus on. Is that it's finally here.
Yeah. I mean, the next part of that question was, why was the Essentials pack not included? I'm actually not sure if I think any of the Essentials cards needed it.
No, I don't think so.
Trying to think if
I
there's
think
anything.
these.
Maybe Glory Seeker, I guess. But
Yeah,
I
okay. But I
don't
think
know.
the Essentials pack is designed for like you joined the game,
Yeah.
you bought the starter set, presumably, or you bought Darkasm or Beastgrave or whatever season 5 is,
Right.
or even season 10 if this is in the future. And
Sure.
your first thing that you should do after you've invested in the game is to buy the Essential pack. Why? Because there's a bunch of good
Right.
cards in there, and there's fundamentals: Great Fortitude, Great Strength, Glory Seeker, Center of Attention, Annihilation. You know, like you need
Yeah.
to play with Annihilation to know it's a bad card. So, like these cards should exist, and I completely agree. I don't think any of them need restricting right now. I can see a point where Glory Seeker could be restricted, but I also think it's really easy to just make sure that there's not a lot of +1 damage in the future, to
Yeah.
where it's not as redundant.
Right. And there's a lot of warbands where Glory Seeker actually isn't a good card. So, like, you know, if but from popularity's perspective, I think we're going to see a lot of it. Like, I don't know, when Mighty Swing first came out, I thought maybe it would need to be restricted, but now we're kind of talking about where maybe that's a necessary piece of tech against the larger warband. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Duel of Wits, I do think is a good point. We do see a lot of that one, but I don't really know what restricting it. I mean, I guess we would just see a lot more unnatural truths. So, I don't know if I
Yeah.
care.
I personally don't care about Duel of Wits.
Yeah.
I think essential cards are important because they should be popular and they should be spread out.
Yeah.
I think card advantage is useful in any card game, and there should be some element incorporated into it.
Yeah.
There are also times where like my opponent doesn't play gambits and I can't play it. Like there's been like I remember I played a game where I was like, "Did you not have any gambits?" He's like, "No, I just figured you had Duel of Wits and I didn't need to play anything, so I didn't."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay."
In
You
some
know?
ways, it's more interesting than a natural truce in that respect. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't always think that just because you take a card in every deck or almost every deck, I don't know if that's always a reason to restrict it.
Yeah. Like
I think it
Potion of
can
Rage and
be.
Hidden Purpose, those were never restricted.
Well, Hidden Purpose was. Which one are you
Sorry,
thinking of?
Hidden Paths.
Oh, right. Yeah. So, I don't know. Interesting. Can't really think of anything else that I would even consider. Were there any other cards that are in the game that we think could be restricted?
Yeah, I think Paul of Fear is a really good
Oh,
card for Wraith Creepers.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
should have been. I think that
if
should
they
have
were
hit.
going to be hit, I could see that. Yeah. And then
Um, I
uh,
think.
but I think you mentioned they almost needed a Errata.
Yeah,
For the patrician,
I think.
but
I think everything to prove. I can see that being restricted.
Yeah, that's the one with the
It's like the new martyred, pretty much.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I
when
agree.
you opponent gets the primacy token, or you have a quarry, and
And
you
no
have the primacy
privacy.
token.
Yeah.
That's pretty silly. I think that's why people aren't upset about Surge of Aggression, because you can just let this in, and you still score it for primacy stuff. Um, I think punching up is another card that I wouldn't mind seeing restricted.
Yeah, it is
Punching up
very
is
good,
really, really good.
especially if you can take
Uh,
it and inspired attack.
yes, then
Yeah,
it's nuts.
yeah, that's true.
Nuts. And I think Soultooth Dagger is another card I would consider. Um,
Do you think that one's better than Silent Sword? I feel like
yeah,
I've seen a lot of that one recently.
Silent Sword is good. I think Soultooth Dagger, namely because this happened to me 3 times now. Um, Silent Sword, punching up, inspired attack, all at
Oh,
once. Not Silent Swords, Soultooth Dagger. It's like 5
crits for
Fury,
5 damage.
crits for like, yeah, it's it's good on my opponent for setting that up.
Yeah,
But the fact that it happened to me 3 games in a row, I was just like, that seems a little bit too consistent for me.
yeah,
Maybe we can and so those are some cards that come to uh, top of
yeah.
my mind pretty quickly. And I think if those were
That makes
restricted in the
sense.
future, I wouldn't necessarily care too much, but I'm sure some people would.
Yeah, and those are all relatively new, and given how long this one took, it seems like we'll have a while to um, enjoy the current
Yes.
meta. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, interesting. I think that's it for questions. Did you have anything
Yeah.
else you wanted to add about the FAR list?
Uh no. Nope. I think I'm just really happy it exists.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed talking about it and its ramifications for the last couple of days. If you prefer reading or want some additional insight from me, you can definitely check out my article on pathtoglorypodcast.com. It's titled FAR Update June 2021.
Yeah.
And you can take a look at some of my initial thoughts there. But really, I really just hope that people start playing the game more and having fun, because I know a lot of people kind of got burnt out from the dominance that was Mollog and Hrothgorn and the crushes. And so um, have fun, play new stuff, try new things, try the Ravagers,
Yeah.
and talk about the game more and play the
Mhm.
game more. I think we're starting to see events happen in real life again. So I'm really hoping that the game starts flourishing. And again, if you're in the United States or can travel to the United States from outside the United States, check out the Lone Star Open, which is happening the weekend of the 24th in July.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, our goal is to get 20 people, which will be a decently sized event. Maybe we can call it a grand skirmish. But if we can get 30 plus players, we'll definitely promote it as a grand clash. So we're really excited to get everybody there and have fun and play games and return to some semblance of normalcy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I've been the last 2 weekends. We've had a game night at the local Citadel, and it's been great to get the models out and play for real. So.
Yeah, I forgot how much stuff you actually need to play the game.
Yeah, like the day before is like a couple hours of like getting the cards together and like all
Yeah,
that. Yeah, need to get
I
back in
got
the
these like
swing of that.
yeah, I got these new like Ultra Pro collectors binders because like Nick was like showing me his collection and they have like a little like slot where you can stick a card in.
Hmm.
So if you notice like on some of the big sets on the back, they'll have like the cover art on the card. So that's how you can
Mm.
delineate between seasons. Um,
Yeah.
and so I spent like 2 days going through every single card, removing it from all the other sleeves and boxes I had, re-sleeving like the Shadespire cards that I had unsleeved,
Oh
and then
no.
organized them 1 through 500 or whatever 4 times. It was awesome. Then I was like, and then someone was like, "Hey, anyone want to play this week?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to meet someone up." And I was like, "Okay, wait, I need my dice, I need my tokens, I need my miniatures, I need my
Yeah.
cards, my deck box, you know, my primacy token, all this stuff."
Yeah.
It was it was a lot when I put it all together in my little bag. I was like, "This is can't believe I used to fly on planes with this stuff."
I know. I know. But hopefully back to normal, and excited to get back into it. It's been a long year.
It's almost been 2.
I know.
It's almost been 2 years.
Well, I mean, the last one in particular it's been a long one.
Yeah.
But I think that is everything that we have today. That's it for this episode. If you are a patron supporter, be sure to check out the exclusive End Phase episode on Patreon, where we'll talk about the warbands we're most excited to play in the post-FaR meta and why. Once again, thank you to our patron supporters. If you'd like to join our current patrons, you can do so at patreon.com/pathtoglory. You can find all of our blog content on pathtoglorypodcast.com. If you have any feedback, questions, or comments, let us know on Facebook, Twitter, or Discord at Path to Glory Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And as always, thanks for listening, and we wish you the best of luck on your Path to Glory.
You ever heard of the phrase "Bye, Felicia"?
Yeah.
Well, it's now "Bye, Mollog."
Wow.
Burn. Just got burnt to a toast. Also, Death Warband's OP right now. It's not even.
At least Drippers can take
Semi-transparent.
damage from lethal hexes. We just need to
That's true.
count our blessings.
Yes. Yes.